Gabriel's Gospel Grace, changing lives and kingdom building one stone at a time.
Good morning to you, and welcome to yet another Motivational Monday. And here we are now in our second month. The first month rollout of June has been fairly successful. There was a few issues in a few areas where we couldn't broadcast all the programs we intended, but on the whole we did manage to hit the 5 episodes a week. And just to recap, that's Motivational Monday, Tuesdays with our couples, Watchman Wednesday, where we look at the world and look at preparedness, and then Thursday, which is our theological aspect, and then Favoured Friday, our good news program. So for today, we're going to look at something relevant. In fact, all of this is all going in a direction. So I thought, let's first of all recap what we covered so far. So we started with overcoming the enemy, to realise there are ways of overcoming our problems in life, and to realise things are coming against us, not necessarily people or situations. There are motives behind the good and the bad in our lives. And as I like to keep stressing, the good comes from God. Then we looked at our motivators. What is motivation? And I pointed out the carrot and stick scenario. That we have incentives, which is the carrot, and sticks, which is a form of punishment. Nearly every decision, especially engineered decision by social engineering, is always using one of these two principles, but often we're applying it to ourselves as well, which can be good, especially if we're trying to do things like diet. But the difference is we set our own goals, we set our own limits. That is part of why we will adhere to it and be more successful, not simply following the rules of someone else. And then we looked at identity. Who are we? More importantly, who are we to others, and how are we perceived by others? Most of the time our identity is based on what's reflected back to us, or through pieces of paper, or titles, or status, all the external, nothing internal. And I think we highlighted that particular week that our true identity is actually defined through our identity in the Bible that's given to us, and more so for those who are born again Christians, it's our Christ identity, which is very empowering. And then last week we looked at our potential, how we unlock it, to recognise that the key, first of all, needs to fit the lock. But more likely, as in the real world, the lock, the mechanism that keeps us locked in and doesn't allow that potential to be released, is what gets more complicated and complex in our lives. So to identify that, I set the task of looking at our strengths and weaknesses, and then deriving from that, what is the key we need to unlock ourselves. But now we're moving on to something else. Today we're going to be looking at the what if versus the what is. If and is, two words often used interchangeably when decision making or looking at our options going ahead. More so, every decision, every consequence is considered through these two words. What if I don't go to work today? It's a broad question. In fact, it has an infinite number of answers. Typically though, the first thing that comes to mind is the negative. And all that negativity comes from a place of fear. So what if I don't go into work today? Ultimately, I could get sacked. I'll certainly have a reprimand of some sort. But the flip side could have been true. What if I didn't go into work today? And I found a new opportunity. I found new direction. See, I'm sure if you actually think about it, it's quite obvious that most of us will look at the negatives on the what if scenarios. So I think when looking at decision making, we should start with the word what is. What is true? And I mean actual true in that situation. What is the consequence of not going to work today? The consequence is I will have to face my boss. I will have to explain myself. I will have to justify it. What is the benefit of not going to work today? The benefit could be I'm looking for an alternative job. I don't feel well enough today. I need a break. But that's the evaluation. The evaluation on the what is much more practical and functional. Knowing that these are the consequences I face, I can now evaluate whether the choice of staying home outweighs the choice of the consequence. The problem with what if is it's immeasurable. It gets bigger the more we can imagine. What is typically based on facts. And as a famous YouTuber also often says, facts don't care about feelings. Typically, what if is about feelings. In fact, even the measurement of the what if is probably more about how will I feel. How will I feel when I am attacked by my boss for not showing up? How will I feel when I'm shamed in front of the rest of the staff for not appearing? How will I feel when I get home having been sacked, or I can't afford to pay my bills that month? How will I feel? But feelings are not our priority. Our priority is actually taking care of the practical things and looking at where we are, and our feelings and emotions can be controlled from that place. So if we go on a purely feeling-based relationship with the world, I'd suggest we'd actually be less successful in life, because based on our feelings, we're more likely to not do things. Even the positive things. Imagining the positive things in life doesn't give that same worth or weighting to a situation's decision. So what is a place to start from. So now let's look at this from a time perspective. Past, present and future. It's interesting, we're in a world of mindfulness, where mindfulness typically is focusing on where we are now. Pay attention to our feelings and emotions. But this is also a barrier, especially with my clients. And even in ministry, these are often, if other ministers may relate to this. We're told we're constantly a product of our past. Well, we are. My point about moving people forward, though, is to say tomorrow is a day of change. And it starts today by a new decision. So let's time travel. Most people's issues and baggage, literally, comes in their past. Bad relationships, embarrassing work scenarios, poor academic achievement. And that's the problem. In reflection, we sit there and say, but what if I did this? What if I'd have done that? What if I'd have said this? What if I'd have taken that action? I think this is often more exemplified in a personal, emotional, again, situation that had consequences, especially if it was painful, such as divorce or death, or an attack in an argument, a row, an angry incident, a confrontation. What if I'd have hit him first? What if I'd have said no to her? What if? You see, what is we can't do anything about it. It is in the past. Now we can change today. If we wrong someone, we can obviously reach out to them and say, you know what, that thing I did then, I just want to call you and apologise for that. That is something we can do today. But the if, what if I contact them and they refuse my call? What if they get angry with me? What if they decide to kick off and throw everything back at me from the past? Well, that's the consequence. But the question of why was it is important to you? Why was it important that you want to feel that you have to rectify the past? The is about action, and it's about taking action now. So in the present, we just give the example of the workplace. What is the consequence of telling someone you love them? We had Andy and Kirsty just the other week on Tuesdays. We talked about their relationship, and Andy recounted the time when he realised it was time to share his feelings and emotions with Kirsty. And I like the way he put it. He made it quite clear that he didn't play with the what ifs. I think the way he described it was what is had to be said, because that comes from a place of honesty. Now, what is Kirsty going to do with that information is up to her. If she decided that the relationship couldn't continue from that point, her friendship is the basis of what they had, purely on the fact they were studying biblically together, then she would take the relevant, appropriate consequence at that time. But it would have served Andy nothing to go by what if. What if she says no? What if she rejects me? The list of what if is huge, but what is this needs to be said, and then it's out there, and then it can be dealt with. And that is the key to what is. What is means in every situation we take stock of where we are. We see the scene. We can see all of the parameters, all of the exit routes, all of the benefits, all of the negatives. And then with that picture, with that information, we can decide what to do next on what is going to be the consequence of an action, not what if would be the consequence. So when we look at the future, when you look at most of your life, and even more so in the New World narrative, constantly, whether it's YouTube or possibly television if you still got it, I remember on television there'd be always adverts about pensions and life assurance. Think of your children 20 years from now. How will they cope without you in the world? It's only for the price of a coffee a day you can take out our life cover plan. What if? But what about now? Why do that? Why pay out all your funding today for that rainy day when you actually pass on, because you might be able to leave some finances to your kids? Isn't it more relevant that perhaps you take time today to make memories with people? Use that money to go to the cinema. Do the small things, because that's what counts. That is what's real in people's lives, not the what if rainy day. Charities, again, also constantly showing you the negatives. I don't think I've ever recorded an advert that actually shows genuine positives of this is what we've done with your money this year. It always still has to come from a place of fear, or showing a very poor scenario. What if you don't pay this money? This will be the consequence for these poor people. You see, if always comes from an emotional place. Is a practical place where we can take actions, evaluate our consequences, but at least be prepared for what's coming. So when looking at the future, perhaps again, it's not about the what ifs, it's more what is. Now, I'm also going to point out a biblical truth here. When studying the challenges that Jesus faced when facing Satan in the desert, interesting to observe, Satan's words were, if you are the Son of God, then do this, this, and this. Jesus' rebuke came with, for it is, focus there, it is written. In other words, what is written in the Bible is truth, and he stands on that truth. And I think as Christians watching this broadcast, that's the point to pay attention to. What is not a fluctuating variable based on our emotions. What if is typically coming from a place of the enemy. Now, am I saying if is always a bad thing? No, it's not. And in fact, something I've been using with my clients is let's rephrase the word if. So for me, if is in fear. So if in fear we evaluate things, which, as I say, the majority will, and I'm sure you did at the start of this, you're more or less looking at the negatives. If this happens, this will be the consequence. If I say this, this might happen. But what about in faith? If today I step out my door, which I've stayed in, locked in, avoiding society forever, but if I step out today in faith, I might meet someone who changes my life. I might find a motive to live again. I might find a friend. I might find reason and purpose in my life. If I step forward into a new project and make the effort, I can't be any worse off than I would have been by standing still and doing nothing. Or what if standing still, being patient, not acting, is the key to success? You see, we'll always come back to is if we come from a place of faith. And even then, with the is, we can see the consequence. But the positives are much more manageable from an is perspective than the fear perspective. the if of fear. I hope this episode's making you reconsider what is in your life versus the what ifs in your life. But I highly recommend that you go back and check out the previous episodes. See how this is all starting to come together as a tapestry. Recognise that if is a marketing ploy used on a regular basis to lead us into a particular emotional viewpoint. But success will come from what is successful in our life, is possible in our life, and through faith, the if of faith, we can prosper into a new beginning. Take today to look at what is in your life and step out in faith. May God's grace be with you. If you were blessed by this video, why not give it a like? Also subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon to be notified of future videos.